Hey guys, this is Ethan with Ready Life. I want to walk you guys through what contents we put in our build out of our Ready packs that has both a boo-boo first aid kit and a trauma first aid kit. So taking it from the top up here, when we built out for the boo-boo first aid kit, really doesn't take that much equipment. What I'll normally do is purchase a small travel first aid kit that has all your basic band-aids in it, has some gauze, has some adhesive tape, knuckle bandages, fingertip bandages, little towelettes for antiseptic too, some sting relief wipes, and some burn cream, and some little tweezers, and then a few other little things in there. This one's nice, it even has a little first aid instruction on any of the boo-boo care too. And then in the top there too, I like to put in some blankets if someone's has hypothermia or something and suffering with that. One of these reflective blankets you can throw over someone quickly. Not a blanket you want to take home at night and use for your own bed, but if you need to keep someone alive, they work pretty well. So that's going to be for any of your non-life-threatening first aid you're going to take care of. Mostly stuff, little cuts and bruises and bumps. Now moving down to the trauma first aid kit, this is where the equipment gets a little more intense. So open this up here. And so in Ready Life, whenever we're training for trauma, we teach the MARCH acronym, and we march to those who are in need of help, with M being massive hemorrhaging, A being airway, and then R being respiratory, trouble breathing, C being circulation, someone's heart's not pumping, and then H being hypothermia because they're cold, or hyperthermia, too hot, and you need to cool them down. And so with this build out right here, these are a lot of the tools that will help you to be able to address those life-threatening trauma situations in first aid. And so the first one, the beloved tourniquet that we carry in here, basically I like to call it the shut-off valve for limbs. If you're having too much bleeding coming out of a limb and you need to stop it, to be able to put it on there, crank it off, that way the person doesn't bleed out. And generally when I build out my kits too, I like to have them ready to go. You can pull them out. You could slip it onto someone's limb. You could go and pull back the Velcro there, be able to pull it down and have it ready to go to quickly apply. And just like I said, put that on there. And you wrap it around more normally, but I just want to show you this, turning that windlass right here to be able to go and get that tight on that person's arm. That way they don't bleed out. It's fun to test it on yourself too, because if you do it right, your whole arm will get really numb. So that's going to be your tourniquet, really important to have. Set that right there. The next thing we're going to have in here, and this is still on the massive bleeding realm, is going to be some gauze and a bandage. So say, someone gets a gash on their chest or something. Might be a little deep, to be able to go rip open your gauze right here, pack that wound really tight, and then wrap that bandage around that person. That way they're not going to bleed out and die from that or suffer from major blood loss. And the bandages I really like to build out my kits with are called Israeli bandages. And it's cool because they're somewhat hybrids between a classic like ACE bandage and a tourniquet. And they also have a pad, or like what would be absorbent on there, that you can put directly over the wound. And so Israeli bandage, so say you go and you have that cut on your arm and you don't have a tourniquet, or don't necessarily need a tourniquet, the bleeding's not that bad, you're able to get an Israeli bandage really tight around that wound. And then that pad on the side of the Israeli bandage is able to absorb some of that blood that's coming out too. So definitely recommended to do the NAR, is what some people call it, emergency trauma dressing, or Israeli bandage as other people call it. So we got that right there. It's always nice too to have some extra gauze with you, compressed gauze, because you never know when a cloth or something could come in handy for a first aid situation, or someone gets a really gnarly gash. One of the next things we have in here is what's called a chest seal. And so this would be for someone that went and had has a wound on their torso, specifically the upper part of their chest, that they're bleeding out of. And a common one for this would be either like a gunshot wound or a knife stab. And within your chest, there's the inner cavity where your lungs are, and then the outer cavity, it's called your pneumothorax. Or your thorax generally is what it's called. Pneumo would be if it begins to form and have air begin to form in your thorax here, to where then it's compressing on your lungs and not allowing your lungs to expand. So a little bit of a complicated concept. You got to kind of train it a little bit to fully understand it. But what a chest seal does is, if you go and you're having that bleeding in the chest, it allows you to put the dressing on there, and it allows air to come out without air coming back in. That way your thorax, this inner chest cavity that you have, doesn't fill up with air and then doesn't allow your lungs to expand and contract, which can kill you too. So kind of hopefully one you'll never ever have to use, because it can get a little complicated. But if you don't have it, someone can have that air fill up and they could die. And let's see what's next in here. Something I like to put in all of my trauma first aid kits too is a trauma casualty care card. And what this allows is, say you come up on a person and they're having a traumatic injury, you can treat them, and then before EMT or anybody else gets there, you can have had this filled out for any information that you know about them. That way when the EMT comes to pick them up, they can grab and go without you having to go through and explain everything if you don't need to. So that can be super handy. And then kind of getting into the airway next. Say someone goes and they have something lodged in their throat, you're able to use the Heimlich maneuver to get that out. But that person may still be having trouble breathing through their throat, or someone may have some head injury and they're having a really hard time breathing through their nose and their mouth or moving their head at all. This is basically an airway that goes up through your nostril and back into your throat, and it allows you to breathe even with head trauma or with difficulty breathing through your mouth. And so I think the technical name for it is, let's flip around to that, Nasopharyngeal airway, or I like to call it the nose hose. Sweet, let's see what we got next in here, guys. We got some first aid tape, really useful anytime you have a bandage or something else you need to pin together. Always good to have a little extra of that too. And we got some what's called Crito gauze. This kind of gauze right here is really useful because it has a powder in it that actually helps your blood to clot sooner. And so this powder will go into the wound, say you're packing the wound, and it'll help all of the blood vessels in there to clot up sooner so that you don't continue to have massive bleeding. And so it's always nice to have one of those along with your normal compressed gauze. Always like to have some extra rubber gloves. Not really necessary, but kind of useful to have. An eye cover. Someone has some eye issues, you can be able to put that over the eye and wrap it. And another little bonus I like to have is what is this March card right here that goes through MARCH, and it talks about what are the major issues with each one of those trauma situations and what to do. And then even at the bottom too, it has some basic details on what is triaging, basically sorting injured patients if you have multiple of them. So really, really valuable information. I like to have those laminated and stuck in here. Another important part of a trauma first aid gear is your shears. And so say someone suffers some massive bleeding, or they're having airway issues because maybe something's wrapped around them, or you could be going and having someone suffering from hypothermia, so they're getting really cold and they have a lot of thick clothing on that you can't get off quickly. With shears, being able to go through and remove any clothing, remove any obstacles like that. And what's cool about the design of most of these shears is they're really strong. You can cut through a lot. On some of these, you can even put a penny in there, and you can cut a copper penny right in half. Really good design. So that's going to be most of what you have in your trauma first aid kit right here. And generally, people will build out, customize their trauma first aid kits, have this basic gear in there, and then add some more items like maybe an extra tourniquet, maybe an extra chest seal, extra bandages, and some extra gauze. I like to carry all that. I like to carry what do you call it? It's basically a brace for any time you would break a limb, to be able to put it up there and bandage that on. And I like to carry a smaller size of the nose hose too, just in case it's for a child and I'm around children a decent amount. And so yeah, you can basically customize, but having this as the core of your build will be really important for most situations you'll face in any trauma first aid. Awesome. Well, thanks guys. Thanks for watching through this, and just contact me if you ever need help building out one of your kits. Thanks guys.